Storytime about how I married my father. Disclaimer, this is not my story time and trigger warning for this. My mom and dad got pregnant with me when they were only 16. They were both young and irresponsible. My mom wanted to keep me, but my dad didn't. My dad basically broke up with my mom and told her that if she wanted to have me, she would have to do it on her own. So my mom did. Luckily, my grandma helped her out a lot and she was able to stay in school. As a baby, my dad would visit me every now and then, but he wasn't really involved in my life as far as my mom says. Here's a little backstory on my dad. My dad grew up in a really strict family and he was expected to graduate and become a doctor. So that's pretty much exactly what he did. During the time that he was in college, he really didn't come see my mom or I, but of course my mom and him kept in contact. When my dad, or should I say husband, graduated from medical school, he finally got married. And of course this was hard for my mom because she thought eventually they would get back together. By the time my dad remarried, I was about 12 years old. I didn't have a relationship with him at the time and it didn't bother me. I was so busy with friends in school I never really thought about him. Not until I turned 14. This is when things started changing and I told my mom that I really wanted to talk to my dad. So he and I started talking on the phone and eventually he came to visit me. But things started changing when I turned 19. He actually ended up getting a divorce and he and I would spend more and more time together alone. Part 2 is Storytime about how I married my father. Disclaimers is not my story time and trigger warning for this. After our first kiss, everything changed. We didn't think of each other as father-daughter. And of course, our relationship began to get more serious. And one thing we kept discussing was, should we tell our family or should we just keep it secret? So we kept it secret for almost a full year. I told my mom that I was dating someone, but I wouldn't tell her who it was. Also, a little side note, my mom and dad didn't have any contact between them at this time. My mom was actually married to someone else and they were very happy. But for me, it was getting to the point where I needed to tell somebody. Because yes, part of me felt that this was really wrong, but the other part of me felt that it was just right. I had never met anybody like him before. So I decided to tell my grandma, and she nearly had a heart attack. She called my mom right away and told her the truth. That's when my mom came over and we talked for a few hours. I explained to them everything and they still didn't agree with me. My mom called my dad and they got into an epic fight. I was totally expecting this, but it really hurt. My mom and grandma were totally against the relationship. That's when they told me that they would never speak to me again if I kept the relationship going. A few months later, we decided to get married privately. I didn't tell my mom. She actually found out through my best friend who was totally against our relationship as well. And she pretty much tells my mom everything I tell her. It's been 2 years since we got married and part of me still feels guilty and like I did something really wrong. But now it's getting even worse because I actually met someone who's my age and is not related to me. But I don't have the heart to break up with my husband/dad. I told my mom about this new guy and she really wants me to get a divorce. I feel like all along I was just looking for the love of a man because I didn't get that from my dad. Now that I'm seeing someone else, I'm realizing how wrong what I did was. But I don't want to break my dad/husband's heart. How can I fix this? What should I do? Storytime about how I dumped my girlfriend when I found out she had cancer. Am I the bad guy? My girlfriend and I have dated for almost 7 years. In that time, she always wanted to get married, but I never really felt married, so I never proposed. 2 years ago, I started feeling ready and I decided to buy a ring. But unfortunately, she was diagnosed with cancer. She ended up having to stay in the hospital for a few months and underwent a bunch of therapy. All the treatments and everything were making her lose her hair, and I pretty much became totally unattracted to her. I know this sounds so harsh, but it's the truth. I struggled every single day as I fell out of love with her. When I talked to my mom about this, she told me to just have patience and to stick it out. But I just could not do it. I also didn't want to deal with having to take her to the hospital and helping her with the medication and helping her with the treatments. I wanted my own life. And suddenly I found myself having to drive her everywhere, feed her, clothe her, basically do everything for her. After a while, I asked her mom to move in with us to help me out. And this is when stuff started getting really bad. Her mom was basically taking care of her 24/7, so I pretty much did whatever I wanted. I would go out with my friends and I even started dating other girls. Here's the thing, my girlfriend and her family have a lot of money, so I basically didn't have to work at all while I was with her. Her parents paid for our rent and pretty much everything we ever did, so I couldn't really break up with her. Part 2 is up. Storytime about how I dumped my girlfriend when she got cancer. Am I the bad guy? My girlfriend's parents paid for our rent and pretty much everything we did. And of course at the time I didn't really want to get a job. So I really only stayed in the relationship for the money. Like I said in part 1, my girlfriend's mom moved in with us to help me take care of her. But I pretty much took advantage and decided to start dating other people. I downloaded every dating app I could think of and I would go on dates every single day. I lied to my girlfriend and her mom and told them that I got a new job. This way I could pretty much stay out all day. So I found myself with all of this new freedom. Would go on dates and pay for everything with my girlfriend's money. I know you guys probably hate me right now, but it gets worse. After a few weeks, I ended up with 2 new girlfriends. So in total, I had 3 girlfriends. And I got really good at lying to each one and spending time with them. I'd see one of them every single morning and I would tell her that I was going to go to work. But then I would really go to the other girlfriend's house and spend the afternoon with her. And then I would end up going back to my apartment where my original girlfriend lived. And I would spend the rest of the night with her. At this point, she was starting to feel better with all the treatments. But I was just not attracted to her anymore. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I dumped my girlfriend when she got cancer. Am I the asshole? So at this point I had 3 girlfriends at the same time, and I was getting really good at lying to them. But since I really didn't have a job and I only used my girlfriend's money to survive, I needed to stay with her. I just didn't find myself attracted to her at all anymore. So I decided to be honest with her, and I told her that I wasn't attracted to her, just to see how she would react. She didn't even get mad, she just started to cry and beg me not to leave her. That's when she told me that she didn't want to be alone. But at that point I just couldn't do it anymore. I was falling in love with my other girlfriends. Here's what I did. I went to my other 2 girlfriends and told them a new story. I told them that I got fired from my new job and that I needed a place to move in. I also told them that I wouldn't be able to afford rent. One of them basically kicked me out of her apartment, but the other one told me that I could stay with her for as long as I wanted to without having to pay for rent. So that's the girl that I went with. Then I went to my OG girlfriend's house and I told her that I just couldn't be with her anymore and that I had fallen for someone else. This broke her heart, and her dad was really close to kicking my ass. They took all my credit cards and cut me out of her account. So I'm broke as hell right now, but at least I'm happier. Eventually I'm gonna have to get an actual job, so I'm still trying to figure that out, but my current girlfriend is paying for everything. And my ex is in remission now, which actually does make me happy for her. I'm about to get murdered in the comments, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Story time about how I caught my baby daddy with my best friend in my own bed. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My baby and daddy and I are engaged to be married. Our baby is almost 1 year old, and we've been happy up until now. The bad thing is that we rushed into our relationship. We never really took the time to really get to know each other. I don't know a lot about his childhood, and I don't tell him about mine because he doesn't ask. We don't really know what each other's favorite colors are, you know, stuff like that. Then I got pregnant and everything changed. He asked me to marry him, and I told him that we needed to be engaged for a while so that we could really get to know each other. At first he agreed, but then he started getting annoyed. He wanted to go out with his friends and be free, but we had a baby. This is where my best friend comes in. I'm a nurse, and one of the things that I told my fiance was that I wanted to keep my job even after I had the baby. So my best friend started coming over to our place to take care of the baby. My fiance owns his own business, so he doesn't have to be there all the time. So he was basically home all the time with my best friend. And no, it never crossed my mind that they would ever do anything behind my back. 3 weeks ago, I started noticing some really weird behavior between them. My best friend had a hickey on her neck, and I started asking her who it was from. I just was curious, but my fiance yelled at me and told me to stop asking. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I caught my baby daddy with my best friend in my own bed. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. When I asked my best friend about the ginormous hickey she had on her neck, my stupid baby daddy started yelling at me. He told me to leave her alone and to mind my own business. So I said, excuse me? She's my best friend and we talk about everything. That's when my best friend told me that she met someone new and that she was really happy about it. My baby daddy told me that I was nosy and he left the room. And that's when all the alarms went off. He had never behaved that way with me before, much less for my best friend. As soon as he left the room, I started interrogating my best friend. And she looked guilty as hell. I asked her who the new guy was and she wouldn't tell me. I mean, couldn't she have come up with a lie? But secretly, I knew that she wanted me to find out. A few days later, I start noticing more weird behavior. My baby daddy asked me to go buy groceries after I got out of work and it was already 10 p.m. He said that we really needed some things for the baby, so I went to the supermarket. It took me about an extra hour to get home after that, which looking back now was plenty of time for him and my best friend to do whatever they wanted. And when I got home, my best friend looked guilty as hell again. She was also wearing her shirt inside out. When I asked her about it, she started stuttering. And once again, my baby daddy jumped in to defend her. He told me that I was being nosy again. Instead of trying to get information, I decided I was going to catch him in the act. I told my baby daddy I was going to stay at work late, and I told my best friend the same thing. But really, I was a block away from our house. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I caught my baby daddy and my best friend in my bed. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. Those fools didn't even bother to close the curtains. I waited 10 minutes and then I walked to the front yard. I started looking through the window, but I really couldn't see anything. I went to the side of the house and I started looking through another window, and I could see that the door to our bedroom was open, which I knew I had closed before I left. I quietly unlocked the front door, and that's when I see my baby on the couch, all by himself. Yes, he was wrapped up in blankets and surrounded by pillows, but the fact that they left him by himself is what angered me the most. I quietly walked over to the bedroom and I could see them both laying on the bed. I thought my stomach was gonna fall out of my butt. I walked right into the bedroom, but they were too busy making out to even see that I was in the room. So I threw my purse right at their faces, but I was weirdly calm. The ones who were freaking out were them. My best friend got up from the bed and basically ran out of my house. She didn't even have the courage to face me, and all he did was sit on the bed and beg me for forgiveness. Then he begged me not to tell his mother. It's like all he really cared about was his mom not finding out. That's when he confessed that his mom was helping him out financially and that his business was not doing well, and that he really didn't want to upset her because she would stop giving him money. So I grabbed my baby and our things and we went to my parents' house. My parents have a huge house with the pool and everything. I don't need to be with him. My parents offered to take me in and take care of us. Of course, I'm continuing to work, but should I tell my baby daddy's mom? And I still haven't spoken to my best friend or ex-best friend. What the heck should I do? Story time about how I'm a homewrecker and I don't regret it. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. I've been dating this guy who's married for a year now. But But here's some backstory. We went to high school together and I was so in love with him back then. I never had the courage to tell him that I was in love with him in high school, so nothing ever really happened. I went to college and I didn't see him for a few years. But when I saw him again, he was married with a kid. At the time, I did have a boyfriend, so I never thought anything would happen between us. But the opportunity arose and I took it. One day I saw him at my gym and I decided right then and there that I wanted to be his girlfriend. I started dressing up really sexy to go to the gym. I'd wear sports bras and really tight leggings, and I had no shame. I was doing everything I could to get his attention. But like I said, he was married. I would go up to him at the gym and say hello, and he would say hi back. He never really had a full conversation with me, and I could tell that it was because he was married. So one day I worked up the courage to ask him for help at the gym. I just pretended not to know how to use a machine and he fell for it. We ended up talking for about 15 minutes, and that's when I told him that I had always had a crush on him since high school. He got really nervous and I realized that he was attracted to me. So I asked him for his number really casually. He did hesitate for like a second, but then he gave it to me. After that, we would see each other at the gym almost every single day. And of course, I would take the opportunity to talk to him and flirt. And eventually he started flirting back. Remember I said I had a boyfriend? Well, I told him that I had a boyfriend just to get him jealous. And it actually started to work. He asked me questions about my boyfriend, and eventually I told him that he was a loser and I was going to break up with him. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I'm a homewrecker and I don't regret it. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. The more I flirted, the more it would work. He started asking me about my boyfriend and I could tell that he was getting jealous. So I told him that my boyfriend was a loser and that I was looking for a way out of the relationship. So after that, every conversation we ever had at the gym was about how I was going to break up with my boyfriend. You see what I was doing? I was getting him so interested in my relationship that all he would think about was me being single. One day I mustered up the courage to ask him if he wanted to go get a coffee with me after the gym. And he said yes without hesitating. We were at the coffee shop for about an hour, but he never really talked about anything important. I mean, he talked about his kids sometimes. So of course I started asking about his wife. And finally he told me that he wasn't happy in his marriage. You see, this is what I was looking for. And after that, I would try to give him advice about his wife. Eventually I told him that it sounded to me like he needed to get a divorce. One day I decided to kiss him after the gym, and he did not reject my kiss. We made out in his car in the parking lot for 2 hours. He told me he would do anything to be with a girl like me. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I'm a homewrecker and I don't regret it. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. As we were making out in his car, finally his wife called him. That's when I took his phone and I told him that he needed to give me attention. And just like that, it worked. We started going on dates and everything. Mostly just to the movie theaters during the day when no one was there. So now that I had him, I knew that the next step was for him to get an actual divorce. Slowly, I started poisoning him against his wife. Okay, I know I sound super evil, but this was the only way I was going to be able to do it. And I did know that he was unhappy with his wife. Apparently, all she really cared about was the kids and not him at all, which I guess is understandable, but you don't neglect your husband after you have children, right? For 2 months straight, every single day I would tell him that he needed to get a divorce, and I showed him that he would be so much happier with someone like me. I had him wrapped around my pinky. Eventually, he started agreeing with me. This is when things really started to change. Whenever he'd get into a fight with his wife, he would come stay at my apartment. He had never done this before. A week later, he decided to confess to his wife that he was seeing someone else, which was the happiest day of my life. He asked her for a divorce, and she had no choice but to say yes. She still begs him to stay with her. Now we live together in an even bigger apartment. His wife hates me and calls me a bitch anytime she sees me. But I won. And yeah, we're already talking about getting married. His kids hate me though. What should I do about that? Go for your dreams. Bye.